The following program is brought to you by the University of Alabama.
Sidney Lanier was for years famous as the poet of the Confederacy. Southern boys and girls would memorize large swatches of the Song of the Chattahoocheee and the Marshes of Glynn. Except for his time as a prisoner in a Union POW camp, however, little was known about Lanier's short 39-year life. May Lamar of Montgomery has done her research and written an engaging biographical novel dramatizing Lanier's college days, his struggles with illness and poverty during Reconstruction, and his fierce determination to be an artist. I spoke with May Lamar at the annual Alabama Writers Symposium in Monroeville, Alabama. Hello, Miss Lamar. It's nice to see you.
Hey, how are you? Nice to be seen.
Good. Well, we're not old friends. Very often I talk to writers, and I've known them for years, and we've talked in the past. Mm-hmm. But you and I are just becoming acquainted. I know very little about your life. I know that you've been a journalist, and I know that you've been involved in advertising and associated public relations kind of things. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
I grew up in Montgomery and went to school in the public schools and private schools in Montgomery and ended up at the University of Alabama. I guess I never had you for a class.
Well, you've done all right anyway.
I studied journalism, so I'm surprised I didn't get over there. And where were you, in Morgan?
Yeah, I was in English in
Morgan.
Yeah,
I didn't have any classes over there. But I just happened to I was a journalism major, and so I was a counselor at a summer camp. And the editor of this little daily in Gastonia, his daughter was in my cabin, and so after my senior year of Alabama, he said, "You want a job?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so that started my newspaper career, obits and weather reports. I was already there. I just happened to get a job. Called home and said, "I have like a real job," you know.
Well, you worked for several papers, though.
I did. I sort of moved around a lot in those early years. I went out to Colorado, worked at a little paper, the Summit County Sentinel up there in the Rockies, and that was a great
Weekly?
Gig. It was twice a week.
Twice a week.
Then worked in Fairhope at the Courier, and all the associated papers there, and loved that town.
Well, sure.
What's not to love?
Everybody loves
It wasn't
Fairhope.
the Fairhope When I worked there in the '80s, it was hard times. They were going through sort of a transition there, and the downtown, which is now so many shops and just packed, it was a small town transition. And then they realized, hey, we have a whole bay here. Our town needs to be a tourist town.
A retirement village as well. I remember when I started going to Fairhope in '69.
Oh, wow.
And it was an artist colony.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of.
And there were some good artists there.
Yes.
Always, yeah. Craig Sheldon, some of them.
Then it became a poor place for a while. And then it became a place where admirals and CEOs retire. And now it's recovered fully from
and started by the single taxers who were sort of like socialists. They believed in one payment. Didn't matter whether you improve your land or your house or not.
A great experiment. I kind of think the experiment is over with for single tax, but
but they did kind of like what Chicago did. They took all the waterfront and they said, this is everybody's. And so that gives the town, to me, one of its great values. It's not like you can't go down except, through private access to the beach or anything. It's all there, for everybody that lives there.
So you lived in some very nice places. You lived in North Carolina, you lived in Colorado, you lived in Fairhope, but you moved back to Montgomery.
Well, that's my hometown. I like it.
And you've been there now a good long while.
I have.
You had, or still have, or at least I know you did have for a long time, a small advertising company?
The smallest one that I know about. It was me and a graphic artist. But I had some good clients. I was very fortunate to have some large manufacturing clients, really.
Uh-huh.
And so did a lot of writing about pneumatic locking systems and high-tech security, and for a while, but that was a great client to have. It really was. I didn't do a lot of consumer, I mean, only if somebody called and begged me and I knew them, or they were my cousin or something. But I did that for a lot of time, a lot of years, and I also write for my husband as a publisher, and he publishes magazines, lots, trade magazines. I still work for those when I need a check,
Well, in Tuscaloosa, we have Randall, and I think runs along parallel lines. They, for a long time, they did a lot of trade magazines. They did trucking magazines in particular. Yeah,
sure.
And that was a horse to ride for a long time. I'm not sure that it is anymore,
Really?
but it certainly was.
The recession hit all the trades kind of hard, but they're all, the ones I know about are coming back pretty well.
Well, you and your husband, or maybe mostly your husband, has a publishing company that also is involved with books. And a book of yours that I've spent some time with in the last few weeks is your book on hunting. And were you acquainted with Chip Cooper because of the advertising, or did you hook up with him for that
the
book?
publisher, Taylor Publishing out of Dallas, asked us to do that book. We knew one of their new editors, and he called us, and he put us together with Chip. Right. And we spent a year, or maybe a year and a half, going to these different hunting places. And some places I couldn't go because no girls allowed. And some places I went and I wish I hadn't. But just hanging around with Chip and watching him take those photographs was, really fun. Right. And of course, he's one of the best photographers I think we have.
He really has come to the top in Alabama. I don't think there's anybody. His Cuba book is beautiful. His Havana book, and this is a pretty nice book. There are pictures in there of people doing all sorts of hunting. I like horses and I like dogs, and there are heaps of pictures of dogs, of course, for bird hunting and coon hunting. But the horses, is there a lot of hunting on horseback in Alabama? Is that what you discovered?
You know what, I couldn't tell you. I went to one quail hunt on horseback.
Right.
I know my dad's, he's 91 now. He doesn't do a lot of hunting. Can't see the birds, but he used to hunt on horseback. But I really don't know how prevalent it is. It's a lot to keep up. Horses, dogs, plus your birds. I mean, But
you got to have the birds, otherwise you're nowhere.
I like horses and dogs too, but I don't. It's kind of like being a newspaper reporter. That was my story for about a year. I don't necessarily know a lot about it. I just reported on what I saw that day, or my impression of talking to people.
You may not have known a lot about hunting in Alabama on day one, but I'll bet on day 300 you knew a lot. I knew a lot more. I was amused by the section on coon hunting, which you have a line or two in there which basically warns people away from it.
I did write that section.
What is it about coon hunting that's so particular?
The sheer terror of it, I guess.
Tell me.
The coon, all these men and dogs down at the bottom of the tree, coon at the top of the tree, and coon comes down out of the tree, and what do you think happens? I couldn't even watch it. Then it was at night.
They have to let the dogs at the coon? It's part of the ritual?
I guess it was that night.
Yeah. No, I hear it. They're just not going to be able to eat that coon after it's all torn to bits.
Right. No, I wasn't a big fan of coon hunting, but the gentlemen that took us were very nice men. It's just, they say duck hunting is dangerous, especially for the duck. The saying goes with coon hunting.
I'll bet. Yeah, not just dangerous, but
perilous.
Pretty grisly. You have, with your career as writing advertising, writing stories as needed, the hunting book, you also did, a labor of love or on demand, the history of your church.
St. John's Episcopal Church in Montgomery was built in 1834. It's an old, it's 180 years old. And we had a history of our church, and it was about this thick. It had everything that ever happened in the church, and it was well done. But we needed a shorter one. And I had stopped doing my ad work and had written a novel that I couldn't seem to get it published. So I was, kind of down in the dumps about it, and somebody called from my church and said, "Why don't you come and write? We need this history of St.
history
John's."
that people can read.
Well, it's short, with
Yeah.
pictures and short little things that people come to our church to see the angels and the architecture, because it's really a beautiful old church.
Uh-huh.
And so I spent about a year doing that. And in fact, while I was there, brushing the dust off of boxes, that's when I came across this urban myth about Sidney Lanier, which is my current novel. And I just thought I needed to look into what he was all about. Sidney Lanier is the biggest high school in Montgomery, and I really, when I think of the name, not now, but used to, when I thought of the name Sidney Lanier, I thought of the school.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
But what's the urban myth? What is the myth of Lanier that's
right
big?
after the Civil War? Sidney Lanier's father was a hotelier. He owned the Exchange Hotel in
Right,
Montgomery.
right.
Part of the Point Clear Hotel, then the Grand Hotel now.
Uh-huh.
Really plush resort up in below Maryville, Tennessee, Mineral Springs Resort, and a place and a big hotel in Macon. He was like the Nicky Hilton of his time. After the Civil War, he gave Sidney and his brother jobs at the Exchange Hotel.
Right.
Sidney was a clerk, and he was invited to this big wedding at St. John's. St. John's had been shut down by the occupiers after the Civil War because our bishop refused to pray for President Johnson. He had a philosophical difference, and they shut us down.
I didn't know that churches
shuttered
were
us.
asked to pray for the president.
And we were the only ones shut down. We weren't the only ones that wouldn't pray for him, but we were the only ones shut down.
Oh,
and
okay.
so they shut us down. And when we came back alive, or they let us come back open, there was this big society wedding. It was a big celebration because it was a big deal.
Uh-huh.
And Thomas Good Jones, who later became the governor of Alabama, he was getting married to Georgina Byrd, and Sidney was a guest. And Sidney came walking in, and one of the deacons pulled him aside and said, "We need an organ player. Our organist began celebrating a little too early, and we need somebody to play the wedding march. Can you do it?" And he goes, "Of course I can do it."
Yeah.
He was a wonderful musician. And so he played the organ for the wedding that day. And when I read that little story, I thought, what does it say about you that you're the guy that they asked? And I started looking into his life, from that point on, and finding out, all kinds of unusual situations for him, and the fact that he was really pretty obscure in his time.
You say urban myth. Did it not happen? I mean, was there not
I
a wedding where he was the
I
organist?
can't prove it.
No?
This is what is handed down in our church for 150 years.
Right.
I went down, we have a kind of a box or a vault where is kept everybody that gets married or christened from the first of our church, and I couldn't find where their wedding day was, even though I know that they were both lifelong members of our church. So I know they got married at our church. And I know Sidney was there at the time.
So
I don't know. That's why I called it a myth.
I think he played the organ. Why
I think
not?
for sure.
It works for me.
He also for a new suit, he played the organ for the Presbyterians on Sunday. He's, so he was known to pump an organ. I guess it would have been a pump organ at that time.
Yeah.
So.
50 years ago, if somebody had asked me to write down what I knew about Sidney Lanier on a piece of paper, I could have. I mean, I had studied the anthologies.
Did you?
Oh, sure, yeah. Mm-hmm. But the single thing that was known about him, widely known, he was the poet of the Confederacy whose health was ruined while a prisoner of war of the perfidious Yankees, who treated him badly. His lungs were injured, right. and he did not live but another 16 years. That was what we knew. Mm-hmm. Some of that needs a little unpacking. You've chosen, by the way, I think wisely, I think it works. Your opening scene in your novel is of Sid, mm-hmm. is his release, his prisoner exchange. He is being let loose from the prisoner of war camp. He's being exchanged, so we don't know for whom, but he's being exchanged. And his health has, in fact, deteriorated. That was the moment you chose to open with, and that's always interesting. I mean, you could have started when he was born, you could have started when he's died, but you chose the moment when he was repatriated.
I guess because that war, just like so many other people, that was the defining moment in his life, was that prison and that disease. If he had not gone to the war, if we had not seceded and he had just decided to go ahead and get his PhD in Heidelberg like he planned, he might have just been a normal, regular old, a teacher or a poet, but not someone that was so desperate to be an artist, a writer, a musician, and a teacher all at the same time. He wanted to be, I guess maybe he knew he was dying. I'm sure he did, because people died of TB all the time. But that weighed on him. He's dashing off a novel. He's 23 years old. In the war, he's dashing off this novel. He gets his uncle to publish it. He's writing poems. He's trying to get on with the University of Alabama. They wouldn't hire him. He's trying to do everything he can to jumpstart this career of his, because he knows he doesn't have much time, which goes back to the fact that he was so sick. He was on his back for a year after he got let out of prison. And I just think it helped light that fire in him, just with that short time that he had.
It's interesting. He's the Sidney Lanier High School is Montgomery. The Georgians, of course, claim him because he was from Macon and went to Oglethorpe. But he was a headmaster of an academy in Prattville.
Very short time.
Practiced
and
law in Montgomery.
In Macon, he did. His daddy, after he tried to do that in Prattville, it didn't work out. Cotton was bad, and this was a cotton academy, basically, the children of cotton growers. But he had married. He had several girlfriends on the line, but he married one girl, and when he was there trying to make a go of this school, his health started to fail. His daddy said, "You need to get home and start to work in the family farm." And so that hit Sidney like a ton of bricks, but he didn't have any choice. He couldn't get a teaching job, with one of the big universities. Well, I don't know how big they were at the time, but that's all he could do. And then he did it for 5 years, and finally he said, "I can't do this."
And he just
I'm
determined he was going to make a living.
With 3 young kids at home, he wrote the way I wrote this book is I studied 15 years of letters. I read his mail from the time he was 15 till he was 30. And he went home one night, and while he was out drying out his lungs, and wrote these letters saying, I can't be a lawyer. Forget it, y'all.
Poor fella tried cures of all different sorts in Texas, in the mountains. I was amused by the whiskey cure. I did not know that.
He liked that cure. I don't think it ever cured him, but
he drank whiskey all the time, and it's good for tuberculosis.
He was. Someone got a quote about somebody that had known him when he was out trying to get cured, and they said, "Can you tell me something about him, about Sidney Lanier?" And he said, "Well, he was no prohibitionist," and that was his whole description of Sidney. And he was a real likable fella, and even in the war, he had a pretty good run in the war until all hell broke loose at the end. But he could get a band together. And you know how big that was in the Civil War.
People loved it.
Huge. And he just had that. He had a knack.
The flute that he played. He's always, but your novel speaks of him always as playing a flute. There's a photo of him on your dust jacket. Has a kind of what I would almost call a recorder. Did he play the horizontal flute?
I've seen several of his flutes. And when he was a youngster, he played that plain reed type flute. But I've seen his flutes that when he got older, they were those big,
held horizontally.
Right.
He loved girls, and girls loved him.
Yes.
It struck me as relatively innocent, actually, but very romantic.
He got into some entanglements because of his romantic nature. Once you were engaged back in this time, especially in Alabama, it was a contract. And he mistakenly got engaged while still in love with another girl up in Virginia, and he managed to get out of it by hook or by crook, and then this girl wouldn't marry him. So he goes over and marries his pen pal from the war, and but
Yeah,
and
three
it all
women
worked out.
so to speak, three women at the same time.
Yes,
Yeah.
And as I was touring around the South, I wanted to see every place that he was too. I went into this little town called Southport, where he had lived right before he tried to bust through the blockade. And there's him and this girl on their little info cabin. Him and this girl. I never heard of this girl. I've been researching this man for a year and a half. I said, who is this girl? And they celebrate the fact that those two were going out and had a big romance, but he was meanwhile engaged to
Anna, Jenna. I mean, they were out there. He had women in 3 states.
He did.
Yeah, good for
did.
him. I mean, he didn't live a long time, so.
No, 4 states.
More intensely.
This was in, he has one in Georgia, Alabama. He had one in North Carolina and Virginia at the same time.
Well, good for him.
Good show.
You mentioned, you did research for a year or more, a year and a half. One of the things that's fun in your novel is the dress, the food, as you say, social manners like the courtship contract. You're pretty scrupulous about all that, eh? About the food and the drink and the.
I try to be, but I love history. I love, when I was a reporter at the Montgomery Advertiser, I used to disappear for like days at a time and go down and learn how to use the archives. I would get so wrapped up, and they said, "We do a story of Milo Howard or something like that," and I would go, and I would get so enthralled in it. I still go to the archives all the time. It's like a treasure chest in there.
But I liked it when they had a banquet, when there was a wedding feast or any kind of banquet. You went to some trouble to say what would be served, and not only what was served, but what was served because they were relatively poor, but what would have been served if they had had more money. Because this is Reconstruction and things.
Oh man, that was a bad time.
Awful. You have. Through this novel, we can't call it a subplot, it's a parallel plot. There's a woman running what Americans would understand as the Breakfast Club. You know the movie The Breakfast Club, it's the Saturday detention school.
Yes.
And this old lady is running it. She's ill, she's about to retire, and she's been stealing money from the students' organizations. What's
Well,
going
one
on
thing
there?
I did, that's based on a teacher that taught my mother and me, Eloise Andrews, the most scrupulous grammarian anyone has ever met. But gosh, that's a good question, Don. I did it to underscore how far Sidney Lanier is from Sidney Lanier High School now. One thing, that the students there might not necessarily even know who
Sidney Lanier was.
And she was this one old fossil still there remaining that did remember, and she went to great lengths to try and commemorate Sidney Lanier. Thus, she's taking money from the school clubs and
I love it.
Erect a statue. But
well, the money is being used for a good cause. She's not stealing it
still theft
for herself. It's
right. But she's like the only one in this massive school.
Right.
Sidney Lanier is a beautiful high school. It's gorgeous. Both my parents went there. My 2 older brothers went there. And she's like the last remaining person that really knows why they're all there, what this means, that the name of the school is Sidney Lanier.
And the perpetual anecdote on this in Montgomery is there's a Robert E. Lee High School.
Yeah. Right.
And
the pen is mightier than the sword.
The pen is mightier than
right.
the sword.
Don't you love that?
I do.
Is there a better high school slogan? I mean,
especially if your rival is the general.
That's right.
That's perfect.
Well, this was, Lee Lanier were such foes on the gridiron anyway all those years, and that's all I can remember as a young child seeing that pen is mightier than the sword, and I thought, God, sure is.
She's an interesting woman. She, this librarian who's running this Saturday detention. When she sees a gifted student, she wants the student to become a writer. And her great disappointment, and readers are going to, this happens early in the novel. You've let me down. You become a physician. When you could have done something important.
Now that's really true too.
There is such a person.
Yes, my friend John Pugh from Atlanta. She was determined he was going to be a writer. She gave him her old, I don't know what kind of manual typewriter she gave him, but he said it weighs about 14,000 tons.
Yes.
And he put it in the attic and went to med school, and he's a doctor today.
Yeah. She though, to pass the time, she's written a novel about Sidney Lanier, which she reads aloud to her captives on Saturday.
That's right.
Who are stuck. And you've written a novel about Sidney Lanier, in which there's a woman who has written a novel about Sidney Lanier. It's lots of fun. We only have 1 minute. You're writing another novel.
Time flies.
What are you doing?
I'm writing a novel about 3 generations of Goldthwaites, ending with Anne Goldthwait, the painter from Montgomery and New York. She lived in New York most of her life, but she was born in Montgomery. And she's sort of like Sidney, who had a brush with fame, but was not hugely famous. But I've been a big fan of hers for a long time. And hey, now that I'm writing for myself, that's just what I want to write about.
And what are her dates, so to speak?
She was born in 1869, died in 1944.
Oh, that's a good long
Her granddaddy
career.
was on the Supreme Court. He walked to Montgomery on the old Federal Road after being kicked out of West Point. Oh. And that's where I start.
Well, Sidney Lanier gets released, and your heroine's father gets expelled. But
Right.
it's a moment,
Yeah.
a changing moment.
Yes.
Well, we'll be looking for that.
Thank you. It'll be a while.
Read it when it comes.
Thank you.
May, this has been a real pleasure.
Me too. I've had a great time.
To order this season of Bookmark on DVD, call 1-800-463-8825. Additional information can be found on our website at www.alabamatv.org.